that makes that challenge even more difficult to overcome, because we are talking about thinking. Yeah, we are talking about changing mindsets, and we are talking about setting a new narrative so that we can actually change the old narrative of living on identity politics. And I believe that, it is important to start thinking, because when we start thinking and look at each other as one that is more superior, as one that is better than the other, then we start building walls, yeah, to divide us, and then we start thinking it's us or them. And this we have to actually challenge, yeah, and we have to voice out. And it is not just the government's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And I feel that, that is the spirit when we formed Malaysia. That was the spirit also of our forefathers, Tunku Abdul Rahman, Datuk On Jaafar, who actually believed very much in the national unity, nation building, and that, that we have a future to actually share this nation. We are diverse, definitely. Malaysia is diverse. But in that diversity, I believe that we can find unity, peace, and harmony. And so therefore, I feel that, the challenge that we have now is, one is the identity politics. The other one is that our institutions have not actually played their role as much as we want them to. They have actually, to be honest, failed us in actually dividing us through not just promoting identity politics, but the lack of good governance. And so therefore you see us as a nation being divided into many, many issues.
First of all, yeah, I'm a Muslim Catholic. That's why I was invited in the UN to speak. Then I want to speak as a Muslim or as a Catholic. I will speak as a Muslim Catholic. So first of all, for this Charlie Hebdo first of all, as a Muslim, I don't agree too. They make fun of Prophet Muhammad as a Muslim, but they have a right to do that. You have to say, you not agree, okay, but they have a right to do it. We need to make it clear. Whether you don't say that when you not agree, other people also shouldn't agree with you. This is, we need to make it clear. I tell the same thing to Malaysian government. You not agree with my government, okay, but don't arrest me. It's the same principle. It's the same principle. So I said, no, they are not Muslim. They want to draw whatever they want to draw. So why the Muslims react this way? Because many are the ones who make wars of corruption. They want to cover up the corruption. They say, okay, it's kind of. But we make it very clear. So there is no line here. What is the freedom? What is freedom we are talking about? Freedom to be yourself. That is freedom. You want to be cruel? You want to be people without moral? You go ahead. And people will go, this is you. So you don't stop people from being bad. No. Yes, you want to be a bad cartoonist, you go ahead. Then people will judge you as a bad cartoonist. And you don't read their cartoon. So it's make it very simple things. You see, the reaction is the problem. You know how many of you in Europe and even in European, how many of you know Charlie Hebdo before the incident? How many? You know Charlie Hebdo, okay? But you are among the few. Yeah? It's not famous. Nobody, maybe in Paris, in Europe, but in Malaysia, nobody knows about that. But after the reaction, it sold 1 million copies after that. Before that, less than 10,000, I think.
I must say that
from the very beginning. In education, I've been in the education space for a long time. I echo what actually Eddie was mentioning just now. We cannot just put education, the system of education is like something that we must emphasize all the time. It is very important for the government to provide a good education system, and which we do not have totally right now. And it is a long way to be a system that we can be proud of. Yes, in terms of documentation, in terms of policies, they are really fantastic. We have one of the best actually policy statements in education, but I think the biggest issue would be the implementation. And I once again I would say, when teachers teach in school, they do teach the children the way that the curriculum actually require them to teach. But at the same time, teachers are also those who would want to give their best to educate the children. But the most importantly, when we talk about unity, you cannot have unity when in the house itself, when at home, that aspect of that culture, of that psyche in yourself is not in existence. I can say this very clearly because just like Eddie, actually I've been married for over 40 years to not a Muslim man. So intermarriage make it a lot easier for me. So you have better understanding. But when in my house, I would say in my house, when I give example of unity, of understanding of other people, because when you talk about unity, it is about tolerance, it's about understanding of other culture, it is about having trust in each other and having respect for each other.
So with these education precincts, I think that we can share facilities. For example, an area where there's Malay schools, Malay Indian schools, Chinese schools, English schools, we can share facilities. Have state-of-the-art IT centers, have state-of-the-art sports facilities, have competitions so that we can, people mixing, competing. What's the point of competing only with the Chinese schools, only with the Tamil schools? Compete on a regional basis, on a state basis, on a district basis. The next one is the question of learning efficacy. This is something that UNESCO has promoted ever since 1953. The fact that mother tongue is the most effective way for people to imbibe knowledge from an early stage. Of course, many middle class people say, oh no, in my family you can learn 3 languages, we speak English, Malay, blah, blah, blah. But if you were a Malay penny farmer in Kedah or Malay somewhere, if you were a Tamil family in a plantation somewhere, if you're a Chinese family in a new village, you find that your mother tongue language is the most efficacious for learning a language. And it's always a misnomer to think that the Chinese and the Tamil schools don't know Bahasa. It's ridiculous. If I always read the newspapers about how Tamil school students are competing in these inventions competitions all over the world and winning prizes. And my 2 children went to Chinese independent schools. They went to primary schools, they went to Chinese secondary schools. Both of them, in most Chinese secondary schools in Kuala Lumpur and Klang now, they take the SPM at the 5th secondary year. Can you imagine a Chinese secondary school student taking the SPM at the 5th secondary year, not knowing Bahasa? My 2 children got SPM grade 1, distinction in the Malay, studying in a Chinese school. Do you think they can't speak Malay? So that this kind of, things being spread around about what the Chinese schools and what the Tamil schools do that is very, very destructive. And as far as we know, there are something like 100,000 non-Chinese, mainly Malays, in Chinese schools today.
And at the end of the day, it all falls back, of course, to education. We just had our panel on education. I'm not going to repeat all of that. I'm not going to try and distill it. There's not much I wish to add, except that I believe we can still achieve an inclusive and shared sense of citizenship, even if schools are mono-ethnic. And I don't know if the panelists mentioned it, but one of my older relatives went to MCKK, the Malay College, Kuala, and yet they were the most enlightened, the most liberal, the most open thinking people that I knew. So having mono-ethnic populations in school does not necessarily mean a tendency towards greater racism. I think the key lies in values, as I'm sure you've heard the panelists, the values, the curriculum, the pedagogy, and the balance between applying things consistently across all schools in the nation while accommodating the needs of parents and indeed the interests and aptitude of individual students. And where there was a choice, and again, this is an example which I never tire of mentioning, in rural Negeri Sembilan, where you have Chinese vernacular schools, you actually have a greater Malay population going to those schools than to the nearby national school. Why? It's because parents can see that the quality of education delivered in the vernacular school is higher. So where you have a market where parents can exercise a choice, they do exercise that choice. And this is something which Ideas has been working on for quite some time as well, with our bottom 40% Voices of the Poor project. I think that was a few years ago. I hope that we can continue to explore that. A final observation I would make, again, in education, because I'm closely involved with squash and classical music, there is this assumption that there's certain things that are only for the elite in the school system. That's not true. Some of the best squash players, some of the best musicians in the country are from ordinary backgrounds. They attend ordinary schools. They deserve to be found and elevated, but that necessitates greater decentralization and more evaluation at the school level itself. And to finish, I just want to say, this is the problem with over-centralization. Whether you have over-centralization in education or other policy areas, when you have a bad decision, that bad decision affects everyone. And it's particularly odious when that bad decision is motivated by race and religion. So I think there's a lot we can learn from the examples of Germany, Australia, Canada. These are all federations which, even the building of schools, content of the curriculum is all state level, and yet they have higher educational results, and they all have, that does not diminish the sense of patriotism and loyalty to the nation that we want to see. So over the years, we at Ideas have tried to express in a pragmatic way our belief in individual liberty, rule of law, limited government, and free markets. I grant that liberalism as a concept can be variously defined, even in political parties that have that word in their name. What we have tried to do is to explore the various components and conceptions of Malaysian liberalism, if you like, and if we have helped to mature an understanding of that, or at least provoked some challenges to your thinking today, then I consider today's conference a success. Thank you very much.